Pro Football Playbook, presented by the Pigskin Podcast Network. Your source for team news, draft needs, player profiles and rankings, full Senior Bowl, Combine, and NFL draft coverage. News, analysis, discussion. It's in the playbook. Now, here is your host, sports journalist Bill Alvstad, and featured analyst Keith Myers. Hey guys, how's it going? Pro Football Playbook Podcast listeners, welcome into the show. I'm Bill Alvstad, your host, sitting down with Keith Myers, co-host here every week, one or two times a week at this point. And right now we're talking about Senior Bowl standouts from this last week's game. Senior Bowl took place. I couldn't tell you who won or lost because I didn't pay attention to that part. I was looking at players. And so we're here to talk about a few of the standout guys. We're going to leave the ones that we thought kind of fell back a little bit to other pundits, and we're just going to stick with the positive stuff because there's already so much to talk about. We'll just go in that direction. So how you doing, Keith?
And I'm doing good, and I just want to point out that I also don't know what the score was, nor do I care, because that is not what the Senior Bowl is about. It is not. It is a showcase of, the top 104 or 108 guys or whatever it is of college.
There's a few more guys than that, but that's how many are going to get drafted, according to Jim Nagy.
And he's not wrong. And so these are just, they're all seniors, so the underclassmen don't get invited, but these are all players. These are all college players that are going to get drafted. And it is a good time. It's more than just a showcase. It's an evaluation tool. And the practices mean far more to the game than the game, except for quarterbacks. But by then you are kind of already know who your quarterbacks are. But for everybody else, the practices mean more to the game. The game's just for fun. So as long as nobody gets hurt, game's just another thing. Most NFL teams, their scouts have gone home before the game starts.
Yeah, except for the ones that are paying attention to the quarterback position. You're right.
Mm-hmm. And they kind of get. And then you leave one person. You have your whole five or six person contingent. Everyone goes home but the one guy who's watching the quarterbacks play.
Well, speaking of quarterbacks, I've got my notes start with quarterbacks, and then after that, it's completely jumbled in random order, just talking about players. So I thought I would just kind of run through them and get a little feedback and kind of find out if they helped themselves a little bit for this draft, if they hurt themselves, kind of where their standing is in their position groups. Kenny Pickett was kind of my first player that I took notes on. 6 of 6 for 89 yards, 1 touchdown in the first quarter, a pass to Abram Smith. His longest completion was to North Dakota State's Christian Watson, who I thought had a interesting game, kind of made a name for himself in this week's practices and games. 38 yards, 20 yards after the catch on that. And that's what he is. Christian Watson, just a side note, wide receiver. He's going to be kind of your slot receiver option in the NFL, and came out and really impressed everyone with his work during the week and his ability to separate and so forth. So it'll be an interesting name to watch if he's a riser up draft boards.
You started out with quarterbacks, and then we're talking about a wide receiver.
I know, but Kenny Pickett. Let's get back on to Kenny Pickett. I thought he heard him speak of the fact that quarterbacks, during the week were evaluated and everyone goes home. That's true. He did hurt himself, I thought, a little bit early in the week, had an uneven practice on Tuesday. Wednesday was a complete whitewash because of a storm that passed through. So heavy rains and winds just kind of wiped everything out. But then again, Malik Willis looked good during Wednesday's practice when all that was happening as well. So
yeah, he was the guy I wanted to talk about when it comes to quarterback, because he looked good every day in practice and looked good.
The reason I brought up Kenny Pickett is because he was kind of the consensus first quarterback off the board on most people's boards, and I'm wondering from you if he helped or hurt himself during the Senior Bowl.
I don't think he did either. I think he showed
the same teams like him or don't like him.
He showed that he is exactly who we thought he is. He's a good quarterback in a weak quarterback class. He would still be number 6 if he was drafted a year ago.
Isn't that the truth?
I would have ranked him underneath all 5 of the first round quarterbacks from last year. But that doesn't mean he's a bad quarterback. He's just, He's the best quarterback in this draft. But it's a weak class. So I think you have to take both of those things together. And I think he showed exactly that. Can he make all the plays? Yes. Is he a fantastic prospect? Not really, but he is NFL ready. He can step in and play right away. He's
probably the most NFL ready, if that's the criteria that you're looking at as far as an NFL team. Do you need somebody that's going to come in and help you right away? I don't know if he would help you right away necessarily. He's going to absolutely have growing pains his first season, but he's probably one of the quarterbacks identified that's going to get pressed into service sooner rather than later, just by the nature of where he may end up. But we'll see. Now Malik Willis had an interesting week because I think he did help himself. He played in a weak division, a weak conference, whatever you want to call it, weak competition.
He played at Liberty.
Right. And he didn't have anybody. Nobody else on that team is getting drafted, right? So no wide receivers, no talent. Okay, so let's just be blunt. No talent around him at all. He made plays with his legs most of the time, and that's kind of what he is in essence as a prospect in the NFL. Is he's really kind of confined to teams that are allowing their quarterbacks to be essentially running backs. And
well, he's more than that, because you look at what he did, especially in the rain and wind on, I believe it was Wednesday, and he was throwing the ball all over the place, good accuracy down the field in the weather. He's more than a running back. This isn't.
Is he the next Lamar Jackson?
No, I think he's the next. God, who's the guy that San Francisco just drafted last year?
Trey Lance.
Yeah. I talked about Trey Lance so much last year. The fact that his name slipped my mind is absolutely absurd.
It slipped to your mind because they didn't play him.
It's true. They didn't play him all year. I think Malik Willis is Trey Lance. I think he has similar
minus the physical attributes, though.
Some of them. He's got a huge arm. And can really throw the ball. He can
take off and run. He just really does. But my thing with him that I thought about before the Senior Bowl and then watching Senior Bowl practices and after the game, he's the same guy that I thought he was going in, though. He's a one read, pull it down and run guy. And prove me wrong on that, Keith, because that's what I saw.
I can't prove you wrong on that because that's what he showed in the game. But I know that he might be a one read guy at this point, but that doesn't mean he's always going to be that.
It's true. That's it. It's true, Keith, but somebody's going to have to spend some time with him, maybe even 2 years before he gets a chance.
If you're asking, if his one read requires him to throw the ball 40 yards downfield on a string, he can do it. If you want it to be a touch pass underneath, he can do that too. Just the physical skills are there. You're right. You got to teach him a little bit about how to go through a progression. But I still think the physical skills, you can't teach the physical skills.
True.
And
he's going to have to develop
all of them.
And if he does develop the way that the team hopes that he would, he could be an outstanding prospect. But I think it's going to be in his third year. I don't know that he's going to be the first year guy, the second year guy. I could be proved wrong on the second year. No question.
Everyone said the same thing about Lamar Jackson.
But you just said he's not Lamar Jackson. So
I don't think so, because I don't think he has that speed.
He's pretty darn shifty. He's more shifty than he is straight line fast.
Lamar Jackson is just an elite athlete. In terms of speed and everything. So
how about Kyler Murray?
Maybe.
That seems like a pretty decent comp, except for Malik Willis is how tall is Malik Willis? I'm not trying to say quarterback height is everything, but it's
6'5" versus 5'11" or 5'10". So
let me see here. Malik Willis 6'1", 6'1", but he ran a 4.42 40.
Okay, so I'm thinking, I don't know why. Why was I thinking he was so much bigger?
Well, Desmond Ritter 6'4", Sam Howell's only 6'1", Kenny Pickett 6'3", Matt Corral's 6 foot. So Malik Willis is just 6'1", but he is the fastest of all the quarterbacks for sure.
Yeah, he's got some speed. He's shifty. He's got the arm talent that is it's coveted by the NFL. I just think he's a high ceiling, really high ceiling.
Well, let's talk about arm talent, because in this Senior Bowl, I thought Sam Howell is the guy. Like, if you want a guy that's going to sit back and be able to make all the throws and the touch throws, Sam Howell's your guy. But he's not at all going to move outside the pocket unless he's just doing quarterback snake.
He's a statue.
Yeah.
So I would say Desmond Ritter has more. He gained more in this than I thought he would. Like, he may have gained more than any of the other quarterbacks, because I had Malik Willis high. I think he's a late first round talent. Him going to the Eagles, in the back end of round 1, I think would be a great fit for them, because it gives them a couple of years to see whether or not they want to go in that route. But he's got just such a higher ceiling. But Desmond Ritter came in. I was thinking he was like an early day 3 pick, and he may be a second round guy. I mean, he started out weak. Let me be honest. He started out not great. But he improved as the week went on, and I was impressed with his ability to get the ball downfield in a hurry. And I just think he's a guy that I need to go back and look more at. Yeah.
Interesting. And a guy that just wasn't there at all was Matt Corral. So it'll be interesting to see how Matt does in private workouts and at the combine. Another 6 foot, 200-pound guy, not afraid to run the ball, runs a 4.65, but he's more elusive than he is fast. And so it'll be interesting to see how he does and stacks up. I do know that, when you take a look at mock drafts and stuff, especially after the Senior Bowl, you got your risers and fallers and so forth. Matt Corral just fell just because of the nature. He didn't get a chance to participate. And that is what it is. But I would imagine that he's probably going to be the first or second quarterback taken off the board, depending on which team needs what and values what kind of attributes with him.
Yeah. His lack of height, his lack of physicality, I think is going to hurt him. And the fact that he didn't, teams aren't going to have the Senior Bowl to go look at and go, here's him against top competition. In the draft class, you can't compare him directly to Kenny Pickett, because Kenny Pickett was there. And Matt Corral wasn't. I think,
and they're just completely different quarterbacks too.
True, but I just think you're going to look at that. I think it's going to hurt him. I think it was a mistake to not go, because 5 of the top 6 quarterbacks did. He's the one who didn't.
And just so we know too, Willis had 54 yards rushing in the first quarter on 4 carries, but he only had 11 yards passing in the game too. Yeah. Okay, and the other guy that participated that I just didn't really get a feel for it all was Carson Strong. I'm not hearing bad things about him, not hearing good things about him.
I'm not hearing anything about him.
I'm not hearing anything either, which is weird. And I'd be concerned if I was him.
Yeah. We didn't mention Bailey Zapp. I mean, he's not gonna move up into the first round conversation, but he went from a guy that I think most of us thought he may not get drafted to a guy that's gonna be a 4th round pick.
He might be an interesting project for somebody.
Yeah. I mean, he looked like he belonged all week. He looked like he belonged. And that is what he needed to do, because he wasn't a guy on anyone's radar.
I just have a bunch of guys now, and so I'm just going to throw them out. Boy Mafi, defensive end, edge from Minnesota. He's expected to do like a 40-inch vertical and a 4.540. I've got him as a top 50 pick. He may have been a top 20 or 75 pick before the Senior Bowl. I think he helped himself. He was the national team player of the game, unblockable during practice. I wrote in my notes, stand-up rusher in college. They had him put his hand in the ground to show his scheme diversity there at the Senior Bowl. He ended up with 2 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, and 1 forced fumble on a strip sack. During the 21 season, he had 7 sacks, 10 excuse me, 10 tackles for loss. He's a guy that I'm interested to see. If somebody needs a pass rusher and they're waiting until the second round, I think he's going to be a guy that's really attractive to teams.
Oh yeah, and he's an athletic freak.
Yes.
So that's not going to hurt.
Yeah.
He's going to test real well at the combine.
Yes, absolutely. What's the guys, the Friedman freaks? He's on that list.
He will be. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you went to edge rusher. I thought the biggest, like, the guy who used the Senior Bowl to make the biggest impact for his draft position was Jermaine Johnson.
Yes, I agree. State. And he was already a top 30 pick, but he went from a top 30 pick to a top 15 pick in my mind. Now that needs to translate to where teams have him evaluated. But man, he just was unblockable at the Senior Bowl and just dictated terms. And a guy like that at 262, 6'5", runs a 4.50, could get into the 4.48, 4.49 range at that size. Teams are going to just be like drooling to get Jermaine Johnson on their team. Yeah,
he's a guy that you're right. He was right in that range of he was a late first round guy. Man, I think he's going to be an early first round guy, like 8 or 9, top 10, like right at the end of the top 10. Maybe he drops to 11 or 12 because he just showed
it's the speed, Keith. You just can't teach that.
You just can't. And it's more than just the speed. He turned speed into power during the drills, and his ability to do that is.
So it's going to translate. You leapfrogged him over like a Cameron Thomas and a David Ajabo and a George Karlaftis. And
Karlaftis
squarely put him into the conversation of being a top 10 pick.
Karlaftis definitely. Alabo, I think, is a guy that I think is gonna. Man, he's right there too. I have a hard time. Do I jump him over that? I don't know. Maybe not.
Another guy that he may have leapfrogged as well is Drake Jackson, who a lot of folks have been talking about at 250, runs a 4.5. If he can get into the 4.49 range, those two players could be comparable in the way that they disrupt offenses.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a fun group.
Let's shift gears and go to the offensive line. I know you like this conversation, Keith.
Yay! This is my part.
I just love Trevor Penning. Can you talk to me a little bit about the offensive tackle, Trevor Penning?
Okay, so this is a guy that played at Northern Iowa. So you're thinking, oh man, he might have the physical. He's going to be a project, but his nastiness and his ability to just get after guys and just win, not early in the down, but through the entire down, was great. He was the best offensive tackle there. I think he's a first round pick after what we saw, because against the best pass rushers in the draft, he looked the part, just straight up. I think he was a big winner.
I've been telling people and you as well that this is my favorite offensive lineman in the draft. It just is. And the reason for it is not because of necessarily he's got the most refined skill set in this draft. I think Evan Neal has that distinction. Does he have diversity? Can he play multiple positions? I think Charles Cross and Kenyon Green have that distinction. Is this guy the most tenacious guy that you want to go to battle with and be in the back alley with in a street brawl? Yeah, he's that guy. He's going to take you down. He's going to piss off defensive linemen all game long. And you want that on your offensive line if you're trying to build an identity for your team and you want to be more aggressive and you want to dictate terms. He's a guy you want on your roster. He just is.
If you are a team, an NFL team that puts a premium on running the football. And I know that that's not, the politically correct thing to be about right now, because everyone's like, oh, running backs don't matter. Why are you running the ball? Passing game wins and blah, blah, blah. There are teams that want to be physical. They want to be dominant on the ground. They want to run the ball because it's about being physical and about beating teams up. And if you're one of those, you have got to have Trevor Penning near the top of your draft board. He is perfect for that. And he's a guy who can get significantly better than he is right now because his technique at this current spot is not great in terms of development. If you continue to improve his technique to go with everything else he has going for him, you could end up with a fantastic player.
Well, and he already grades out as a better pass blocker than he is a run blocker. He's 6'7", 330 pounds. His arms are almost 35 inches. He's got a 36-inch wingspan. 36 inches, Keith.
I know, it's huge.
Come on, the guy just is a freak of nature. I mean, Evan Neal is that guy as well. But Evan Neal, I'm going to just be completely honest. Evan Neal plays a different type of game. And it's just one of those things. Trevor Penning is just a different beast, a different animal.
I would still draft Evan Neal.
I get it. I do. I really do.
He's
but
not.
Who wants it? Who wants to be successful more?
He's not just a technician because he has the skills and all, but he's also got the physical talent. He's got that dancing bear. Like what, that's kind of the thing with offensive tackles. The best ones tend to get that thing, and he's got that. He's big, he's huge, he's strong, but his feet are really good, and he knows where to place his hands and when to move and when to shift, and he looks like a guy who steps in and is an instant difference maker. Evan Neal is. I think Trevor Penning is also. But in a different way, and in I don't want to say a less dominant way, but just, I don't know, a less steady way.
Yeah. No, he needs a little bit of refinement. There's no question. But I think that the will, the want, and the need is there for Trevor Penning to be successful. And I think that's going to put him over the top. To me, he's just one of those can't miss draft prospects. I don't know if I can say the same thing like about Kenyon Green, for example. Kenyon Green's ranked higher. He's on everyone's board as the second or third ranked offensive tackle in this draft from Texas A&M. I'm just not sure. I'm not sold on that. The only other guy that I was prepared to talk about on the offense was Zion Johnson, the guard prospect out of Boston College. Had an opportunity to take offensive center snaps at the Senior Bowl just because of lack of centers in this draft, and be at the Senior Bowl. And he did pretty well. Now, there's a mixed bag on him. I know that a guy like Rob Staten with the BBC is a guy that doesn't put a lot of stock, and Zion Johnson doesn't like him as a prospect very much. But most pundits out there are kind of giving this guy a first, second round grade. I'm not so sure he's a first round guy. That second or third round on him might be an interesting place to take a potential guy that could play three positions for you on the offensive line.
He's a guy. Okay, first of all, he's a guard. And guards are going to get drafted lower. Second of all, his greatest asset is his ability to play really all five positions on the offensive line, because you could use him at tackle in a pinch, but he's not going to be good there ever. He could be good at center. I think him taking reps at center was fantastic for him. I think he would be, your fourth tackle on game day. So if two people get hurt, he could play tackle for you. So more of an emergency guy. He could be your third guard. He might be a starting center. Maybe. His value is his versatility and the fact that you can have him be the primary backup at all three positions in the interior.
But where do you draft the primary backup guy?
You don't draft him in the first round. If you were drafting,
no. But realistically, where does this guy go?
As a guy who has a chance to become a starting center, I could draft him in the round 3 and know that if the worst case scenario is that I have a very versatile, valuable backup on my offensive line that can come in and play 3 positions well, 2 positions in an emergency. And there's value there, but I don't draft him in round 1. Hey, no.
So an interesting tidbit, and we just talked about Bruce Feldman's freak list, if you will, the guy, the guy that kind of measures athletic ability on prospects. He's on his list, and he at 6'3", 310 pounds coming into college, he jumped to 34.5 inch vertical with an 8.8 broad jump, a 4.7 shuttle, and 32 reps on the bench. That put him on the list. So obviously this guy is athletic. To me, at 6'3", 314 at the Senior Bowl, just looking at his body type, it didn't strike me as a guy that was like super athletic. So it surprised me a little bit that he might have been on that list.
Yeah.
Okay. So how about tight ends, Keith? This is a position that nobody's getting excited about, but I wanted to talk about Jake Ferguson and Greg Dulcich out of UCLA. Okay. Everyone talked about Jake Ferguson as being the tight end prospect in the Senior Bowl. It was going to be the highest drafted. He did great at the Senior Bowl, 3 catches, 62 yards and a touchdown, 6'5", 250 pounds, does everything well, blocks in line, but diversified, jack of all trades kind of tight end. Nobody was really talking about Greg Dulcich out of UCLA before the Senior Bowl, and he came in and he was the most impressive tight end during the week. Both inline blocking and then running and separating and kind of showing some explosive traits there. So I don't know if you had any notes on him or not. I just thought I'd throw it out there just because I thought they deserved a mention. We haven't talked about that.
He's a guy that he is solid as a blocker, which I know is an underrated, and most people are like, who cares? Tight end, can they get downfield? Can they stretch, the middle and do these things? Because that's a harder skill set to find and blah, blah, blah. He's got great hands. But you know what? He's a guy that does so many things. And his ability to line up on the line and be a good blocker on top of being a passing threat. I just think that people are underrating him. And honestly, one of the things that's kind of surprised me, and I'm just going to go on a little rant here. UCLA has a bunch of guys in this draft that are way better than you'd think, given that team's record.
Pac-12 has an interesting track record of having guys undervalued, prior to the draft and then going higher than people expect.
But part of it is that UCLA, although they had some good upsets early in the season as a team, were kind of dreadfully bad for most of the year.
Is Chip Kelly still there, Keith?
He is still there because they owed him too much money to fire him. But
he knows how to an offense. The guy knows how to construct an offense. He just does.
But this is my rant is that if you go start looking at all of this and you start scouting players and you keep coming up with UCLA guys that are in the mix for, those middle rounds, the second, third, fourth round. There's a lot of guys in that range from UCLA. And you're thinking, how is this team so bad? And then you go, oh, that's right. It's Chip Kelly.
Oh, come on now. No, I love that rant. I love that rant.
No.
Chip Kelly was close to getting, national championships at Oregon. He had a tough time in the NFL. And then, is just now starting to have the time to build back a program at UCLA. I'm interested to see if it turns out for him.
What he did at Oregon was new. It was innovative. It was fun.
And he had the right people. He had the right prospects.
He went to the NFL and proved that system doesn't work. In 2 different places, it was like, wow, this is a mess. And now at UCLA, he's finding out that he's not a great recruiter. He doesn't want to do that. He's an X and O guy. And you have to be able to recruit. He doesn't recruit well. And you can't just win with that particular scheme anymore. You can't just be faster than everyone else in terms of the way that you operate, because so many teams do it. People have learned how to defend it. Honestly, he got so little out of what looks like, look at the UCLA draft class. The guys that he's got in this draft class and where they're going to go and what their skill sets are. And then ask yourself, how did he do so little with so much? And that's where my opinion of Chip Kelly is going to go. And so rant over. Next.
Okay. So I want to talk about one corner, and then I wanted to talk about the defensive line players.
Okay. Corner?
Yeah. Tariq Wolin out of UTSA. He just keeps popping into my head after watching him play, and I can't get him out of my head. He's one of those guys that you never heard of before, comes in, steals the show a little bit, performs higher than you expected, and then he kind of wows you with his measurables, and it just kind of stays there. And he's that guy, 6'3" and 3/8, 205 pounds. He ran, according to GPS, 22.45 miles per hour at Tuesday's practice. Oh my goodness, that's fast, ladies and gentlemen. That is just a really fast human being. 2 years of cornerback experience after converting from wide receiver. He's a bump and run corner.
What does UTSA stand for?
Oh my gosh. Don't ask me those technical questions, Keith. That is not.
University of Texas, San Antonio.
Okay. I knew it was the University of Texas, but I wasn't going to guess the SA part.
Sorry, you brought him up. I thought it was.
Last week you tricked me with silly, groundless wide receiver questions. Nobody cares about that position, Keith. And now you've asked me about like colleges and stuff. Come on, look at me. I'm not a guy who's going to answer that question.
Okay.
Sorry.
UTSA cornerback Tariq Wolin. This guy, his measurables, he's going to go into the combine and wow people, and everyone's going to be like, oh my God, who is this kid? And Bill's going to be like, he's the guy I've been telling you about for 2 months.
Yeah.
He athletically, he is crazy good, but he is raw.
Yes.
As a cornerback, he is super athletic. He's definitely more athletic than most of the wide receivers he'll be playing against at any level.
And you know what happens to guys that are really athletic and have the size and are just really raw? They don't get drafted as high as we all think that they should. We all do our mock drafts prior to the draft, and we all look at those players and we're trying to figure out how we should fit them on our team. And we end up drafting them higher and higher every time we do the mock because somebody else discovers exactly what we discovered. And pretty soon you take a 5th round guy and you're mocking him in your 3rd round. That's what I think is going to happen to this guy. He's just one of those guys.
It reminds me of Menifanu.
Yes,
from a couple years ago.
Exactly.
And Tariq Wolin,
last year.
Was it last year or that was 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's been so long. To be fair, with COVID, the last year seemed like 4 years. So anyways, so with Wolin, I think he's going to do that. I think he's going to be that guy that we keep projecting higher and higher and higher. And he's the NFL, they see his tape. They know that he's an athletic freak, but he's not going to go as high as we want him to.
There's a reason he wasn't recruited to play at Baylor or University of Texas A&M or some of the other bigger schools, LSU, etc.
But athletically, he could have been. So why was he still in San Antonio? I think that's going to come up.
Or he grew 3 inches after he got to school.
That's possible too. But he is a guy that he performed really well in one-on-ones. He's smart, long.
He did get invited to the Senior Bowl, Keith. He did get that invite, and there's something to be said about Carnegie and his evaluation team, in getting prospects that nobody's ever heard of to come in and light it up.
And light it up. That's the thing. And light it up. He's a guy who might have a lower floor compared to other guys in the draft, but his ceiling is high, and I can see him being picked late and then being really good. And I've been trying to think of athletic, kind of freakish players that get drafted late and end up being really good at cornerback.
That used to be wide receivers?
That used to be wide receivers and are still really rare. And Bill is laughing because Bill knows exactly who I'm talking about.
Yeah, baby. Say it.
Richard Sherman.
Yes.
He's the guy. Now, Sherman was coming from Stanford, not UTSA, but
Richard Sherman did go to school as a wide receiver.
He went to school as a wide receiver. He spent a couple of years as a wide receiver, then switched to cornerback, was not a particularly good cornerback. His first year as a cornerback, his second year, he was a little better, showed a lot of promise, but he was not looking like a guy who was going to be a first round pick or anything. But his athleticism was insane. His work ethic was fantastic.
Which round did Richard Sherman get picked in?
Round 5.
Round 5. Where did
Yep.
I just say Tariq Wolin might get drafted?
Round 5.
Round 5.
He's a guy that looks like a 4th or 5th rounder to me. He might end up as a career special teams player, but athletically gifted enough.
But if you're going to pick a special teams player in the
there,
5th round, he's your gunner and he's your guy and he's making all sorts of plays for you and gets a chance to be in the rotation, eventually learns the position. That's a perfect spot to pick a player like that.
yeah, because he's a guy that can do a lot of those things, uses athleticism. But if his work ethic is what it's reported to be, and he comes in and he really works and he learns, he's a guy that, yeah, sure, his floor is as a career special teams guy, but his ceiling, if he can reach it,
is Pro Bowl.
Is a Pro Bowl corner. How do you not take a guy like that if he's available in rounds 4 or 5?
I know.
I think you have to,
especially if you have extra picks. Okay,
yeah.
So before we get out of here,
he's a guy I really like. In case you can't tell,
me too. Me too. Okay, so I'm going to throw out like 5 or 6 names, Keith, and you pick one that you want to talk about.
Okay.
Defensive tackle Logan Hall, defensive end Kingsley Enagber, D'Angelo Malone, Perrion Winfrey, or
okay, you can stop talking because that's the one I want to talk about.
Okay, Perrion
Winfrey. I'm sitting here waiting. I'm like, oh man, please say Winfrey. Please say Winfrey. Please.
Okay. Well, I was going to say Wyatt as well, but go ahead.
No Travis Jones. Interesting. Perrion Winfrey, defensive tackle out of Oklahoma. He's a guy who did really well this week. He was a guy as a pass rusher, he is an interior pass rusher. So a 3-tech guy, super disruptive. Guards, centers, they struggled with him because of his change of direction and his 86-inch wingspan.
My goodness. That's Shaquille O'Neal type wingspan.
I mean, this is a guy, oh man, those are like the longest arms. You are not outreaching him. He is going to be able to get in under your pads, and he's quick for a guy who's 6'3", 326. Honestly,
emphasis, Keith, on quick, not straight line fast.
No, but you don't
He's first step quick.
Your defensive, if you have a defensive tackle that's straight line fast, you convert him to defensive end. No,
and he's got that quickness to power ratio down.
Yeah,
like he can really jar guys.
You don't need, or for that matter, really want your defensive tackles to be straight line fast. You want guys that are quick because you have to. It's that first step. Can you get? Warren Sapp was probably the best I've seen as a 3-tech, and his ability to, at the snap of the football, get between the guard and the tackle before the guard has a chance to move. And Perrion Winfrey reminds me of that. He's bigger. And Warren Sapp's like a Hall of Famer. So I don't want to be like, oh yeah, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. I'm not saying that, but that's who he reminds me of. Super quick. That first step is incredible. And he's really long arms,
very
great
long.
Athlete. I think he is.
He looks like a defensive end, and he's going to be like a 3-tech.
Yeah, and he looks like a defensive end at 326.
Yes. Right.
Yeah, and so he's going to be a 3-tech defensive tackle.
I think he's a little lighter than that. I think he's in the 310 range. But
well, that's what he was listed at on the Senior Bowl site. So
wow, really? Gosh.
Yeah,
he did that on purpose then, because he's on the Oklahoma University site as being 303.
So if he came in at 326 and still did what he did during that week, yeah,
right.
This is a guy that he's going to be a first-round pick, and pundits are going to be like, "What is this team doing? You could have had him in the second round," and then he's going to be great. And the pundits are like, "No, I never said that," because that
he
happens
was the
every
most
year.
Disruptive player at the Senior Bowl. I'm just going to say it right now. The most disruptive player. Good. He was the MVP of the game. 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, 5 tackles total. Just pretty much did whatever he wanted to do when he was out there. And during the week, too. One of the rubs on Perrion Winfrey all this whole week was a guy that was disconnected, a guy that had trouble being consistent. and he wanted to show everyone that he could be that, and he was.
He was
really excited.
Tackle. He was a nose tackle at Oklahoma, which meant they were using him out of
position. Yes,
they were playing him out of position. He still looked good.
Not a lot of people know that or paid attention to that, but that is absolutely a fact.
But they played him at nose tackle, which is not his natural position. At the Senior Bowl, they moved him to 3 tech, and his ability to be disruptive is undeniable. I think he's a fantastic
he helped
player.
himself at the Senior Bowl, Keith. He's one of the players that really did help himself. I said, what? To your idea of the first round, but he's right on that bubble for me.
I think he goes in the early 20s. I think he goes in the early 20s.
The reason that I hesitate is that I think a lot of, it's hard. It's really hard. It comes down to value, what teams value, where they're picking, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean that he's a bad player if somebody picks him up at 35 or 40 or whatever.
It's going to come down for him. It's going to come down to interviews, because he does have that reputation for that guy that is a little disconnected, as you said. But if he comes in, he interviews well, and all of that, and you start to look at the Senior Bowl tape, and you go,
look at the physical attributes.
Yeah, and you realize, okay, don't look at his stats, because he was playing out of position at nose, and now he's playing at the 3. This is a guy that he is going to go high, and whatever teams drafts him, they're going to be happy with him. I like Perrion Winfrey in this
just
draft.
Based on my own personal desires and wishes for a team thou shall not be named. I don't want him to go in the first round, Keith. I want him to be available in the mid 40s.
You want him to be available at 43 or whatever it is.
Ish.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
Whatever.
I do.
Yeah.
And that's where I had him pegged before the Senior Bowl, and darn it, that's where he's going to stay.
Because I know exactly what you're saying, and you want a specific team that you root for to get a massive. It needs his skill set to get a massive steal in the middle of round 2, and then all of a sudden have an elite player that has a first round talent, but they got in round 2. Yeah, I know exactly where you're going with that.
And I think I speak for a number of fans who have a similar wish for their team. Yeah, because he's one of those players. I mean, really, the coveted spot in the NFL that everyone seems to want, but undervalues for whatever reason, is that 3 tech disruptive pass rushing defensive tackle that seemingly every team needs, every team doesn't seem to have. But then when it gets time to draft one, doesn't really want to spend a first round pick on one. So that's why I kind of went, what?
So here's I think the bottom end of where he gets drafted is the Chiefs at 29, or is it 30? It's in that range, because Frank Clark's almost certainly going to be gone off their roster. He didn't perform as well this year.
Jaron Reed is possibly gone as well.
Yep. I mean, he was just a 1 year, late ad for them. But Frank Clark's probably going to be gone because his cap number is crazy, and he had an off year. And they need to find some cap room, and I think Winfrey ends up just being exactly what they need to be an interior pass rusher, disruptive player on a rookie contract that gives them what they need at a low price. And I cannot see them getting past the Chiefs.
Wow. I don't have any other names that I really needed to talk about during this show. If you have one, that's fine. Travis Jones, you mentioned earlier, I thought he was the most physically dominating player at the Senior Bowl. Just didn't put up a ton of stats at 6'4", 326. He's a guy that's an immovable object, a guy that's going to plug holes and take up double teams and stop the run. Travis Jones out of UConn.
The only guy that you didn't mention that I think deserves a mention here is Trey McBride, who's the tight end out of Colorado State. And
probably
again,
consensus number 1 pick not number 1 pick.
Number 1 tight end.
Number 1 tight end. Yep.
Because you talked about Dulcich as the guy that like really showed himself. I think that Trey McBride also did. It was a standout performance for him all week. He's got upside as a blocker, you could say, which basically means he's not great at blocking. But as a pass catcher, He is a guy who is so smooth in routes.
Yeah,
and
I was concerned
great
a little
hands.
bit. I came away concerned a little bit.
Really?
Yeah. And the only reason is length. I was a little concerned at his measurables, where his arm length came out right at 32 5/8, which is a little short for that stature at 6'4", 249, wingspan at 78.
It's the
and then a 40
bit.
speed at like 4.65. I just didn't see special there. And so while he might be the top pick at tight end, maybe in another class, he might not be.
The thing that he showed that I think he needed to is his ability to catch the ball through contact, and that, he's getting hit, he's getting pushed and whatever, he can still make contact with the ball. His hand-eye coordination is what you need to be a great receiving tight end in the NFL. And I think that was kind of on display. Yeah. And I think,
where do you see him going? What's his value?
I see him going as the first tight end off the board, probably in the high 30s.
Yeah, I agree.
38, 39, 37, take your pick.
And he's a young prospect too. He's just turned 22, so I think that, he's definitely got some upside. I mean, he does a lot of things great. I think he's a great route runner. I think, he's got good enough speed, and he's elusive enough. He knows how to run those routes where he can gain separation against certain matchups.
So at wide receiver, there's a group of really good ones at the top, and then there's kind of a shelf, right?
Wide receiver, did you say?
Yeah, at wide receiver, there's this drop off where if you're not getting a guy in the first round or the mid to early second, then you.
So where do you think that shelf is, Keith? I mean, we on a big board? Let's just say 12 to 15 wide receivers in. Is there a shelf?
No,
or are we talking 25 receivers?
Oh no, I'm
where
thinking,
a normal draft would be.
I'm thinking earlier than that.
Oh, okay.
There's a shelf at like 9, and then there's another shelf at like 25. And so, but there's a gap on the big board in that range. And if you're the team that needs a weapon and you're in that range just after the shelf, you're going to grab McBride and be happy.
Interesting. Yeah. No, interesting.
I think that's where he goes. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I could see that potentially.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah. Because we haven't really talked a lot about wide receivers. You gave me a chance last week and I declined politely.
I put you on the spot and said, "Hey, let's talk about receivers." And you're like,
wasn't quite
you
ready.
picked the one position I didn't prepare for.
Well, we talked about them. We had a position group conversation quite a few weeks ago, actually, back in November, where we talked about them. And I haven't really looked at them since, to be completely honest with you. And so it's time that I start getting back into the second round of evaluations on position groups, especially after the Senior Bowl, and reevaluate based on new information and so forth. And then you've got to do that again, when the combine comes around and so forth. So yeah, we need to have that conversation for sure.
We do. And as you pointed out last week, this is actually a tough position group to evaluate at the Senior Bowl. Because you're talking about you don't see the routes. You might see the end of the play when they make a catch.
It is really hard.
But you evaluate based on the routes and their ability to get separation and their ability to beat the press, but that stuff doesn't happen on camera, and it makes it really tough.
Especially now, Keith, where they've just decided to broadcast Thursday, Friday practices, and Friday's more of a walkthrough. Sometimes they do Wednesdays, but NFL, stopped doing Tuesdays and Wednesdays for the most part, and so you're just kind of reading about other people's evaluations, and that's not great. So.
Yep. So it is. I mean, that is. It's a really tough position to evaluate for those of us who aren't in mobile. It's just it's tough. So I put you on the spot last week, and I shouldn't have, because that was unfair.
No, you should, because I like being accountable.
But I still did, because it was.
I'm waiting.
It was great. It was great entertainment, and that's
I'm
what
waiting. I'm waiting. I'm a patient person, Keith. I'm waiting for that moment.
Revenge,
vulnerability. Yes. Yes. I'm gonna hit you where it hurts the most, and you're not even gonna know it until it happens.
You're gonna ask me about some offensive linemen. Which
I'm gonna ask you about some beer. Is what I'm gonna do, Keith.
Oh,
I'm gonna ask you about a beer that exists that I know about that you don't know about, and I'm gonna try to get you, and we'll see how good you are.
You're gonna ask me about a beer that you think I don't know exists. And I'm going to be like, wait, okay, here, let me tell you.
Let me pop it open right here. And
let me drink some, and I'll tell you, because even though you're talking about a beer from like Florida, I happen to have some in my fridge. No,
right? That is Keith, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, let's get out of here. What Sounds a fantastic show. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, that was fun. Enjoy it always. All right. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. I'm at Alvstad NFL. The show's at PF_playbook on Twitter. You can find us on our website and YouTube. We've got a YouTube channel. All the shows are up there on video format. And then you can find us on your favorite podcast platform, and please subscribe. So until next time, take care, guys.
Yep.
Thanks for listening to the Pro Football Playbook Podcast. Follow Keith at Myers NFL. Bill is at Alvstad NFL. The show is at PF_playbook. Listen and subscribe on your favorite podcast app or YouTube, and at our website, profootballplaybook.co.